Good morning, good afternoon, everyone joining us from different locations. And a very warm welcome to today's session of the Gemini Essentials Bootcamp organized by Adaptex Academy. My name is Raval, and I'll be moderating today's session. So, just to give you a bit of context, this bootcamp is part of AI capacity building for workforce transformation and digital readiness under an AI Opportunity Fund for Asia Pacific, an initiative of AVBN with support from Google and Asian Development Bank. And we Adaptex Hub are the local training providers to implement this project. So, today's session focuses on automation with Gemini, where you will learn how you can automate tasks, improve prompting, and boost productivity. So before we begin, just few housekeeping points. Please keep your microphones muted so we can avoid background noises. And we also encourage all of you to please write down your questions and comments in the chat box. So, just to make this session more interactive. And we will be addressing your questions in the end. Also, we'll be recording this session for learning and attendance purposes, which lead us to uh, requesting you to please stay connected with this session throughout the session. So, because in the end, we'll be having a quick group photo, which will be marked as your attendance. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Zafi Sharan Sayed. He is an AI expert holding a PhD from Cardiff University, UK. He has an extensive experience in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and digital transformation. And he has been actively involved in helping individuals and organizations understand and apply AI tools in practical settings. Throughout his work, Dr. Zafi focuses on enabling people to use AI tools effectively, responsibly, and productively. So Dr. Zafi will now guide us through today's session on automation with Gemini. Please feel free to write down your questions as we move along this session. So let's begin. Dr. Zafi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'll share my screen and then we can start in earnest. So hopefully my screen should be visible now. So hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Let's start with this session. I'm Dr. Zafi Sayed, and in this session, I'll talk about artificial intelligence in general, but more specifically, we'll talk about automation. In previous sessions that we've had, we have talked about automation where we were crafting prompts for almost a use in a different chat window. But this time around, you'll see that how we can create a good prompt and then just create reusable gems. So gems is sort of a mini agent of sorts that is available in Gemini, and we can use it in order to automate much of what we do. But before we do that, just a brief introduction. This session is part of the AI Capacity Building Initiative focused on workforce transformation and digital readiness. For those tuning in the first time, this capacity building initiative focuses on three cohorts. So the first cohort is students, the second one is education workforce, and the third one is healthcare professionals. Now, for each of these cohorts, the course has been designed that in a way that there are 5 modules, starting from the fundamentals of AI. The second one is about recognizing where AI could be used as smart assistants. The third one is on prompting and how we can use prompting in order to get better results from this AI assistant. The fourth one is on the ethical use of AI, in particular, the use of AI in a responsible manner. It doesn't really matter whether we're using it as students, as, for example, workforce in the education sector, or especially in the healthcare sector. It's pivotal that we use it in an ethical manner. And the final one is there are updates in one or another AI tool every few weeks. So how do we stay updated and not get overwhelmed by the advancements that we hear about in the news? So let's start with the fundamentals of AI. And the first part is just to have a better grasp of what we are dealing with so that we can use AI in a responsible way. So you can think of AI as a computer software that has been trained on lots and lots of data. And what AI does is that it finds patterns within that data and uses those patterns in order to make predictions or to generate content. So think of the pipeline of AI being such that we have data that's available, and AI would identify similarities between the data that is already there and the question that you eventually ask from it. And on the basis of that, it would produce some output. So essentially, it is not really thinking in the form of the way that humans do. For example, AI is solely reliant on the data that it has been trained upon. If that data contains any biases, that AI would also be biased. So we need to be mindful about that, especially when the end user is using AI for any task that deals with human beings. There are two fundamental types of AI, if we could think about it, but it's slightly similar and different from what we already have in terms of automation. So, for example, the traditional automation is rule based, where we have predefined conditions. So, for example, if something happens predefined, let's say, then there is an action for that already devised. And for every action, there is a fixed outcome. So this works wonderfully if only those events occur for which we have defined these rules. But what happens if an action occurs where previously rules have not been defined? Uh, our system would be in a limbo. So traditional automation may not really work in every case. And this is where AI comes in. So the way that AI works is that because it is continuously learning from the data that is available to it and then learning patterns, it can adapt its output. So for example, if events occur where we already have rules, it might as well just apply those rules. But if events occur for which we don't really have previously established rules, it can learn from the data and then it can develop new rules. So data-driven automation is really the way forward, and that is something that we'll be focusing on in this session. Now, there are two fundamental types of artificial intelligence, even though the buzzword of AI has been really popular lately, but we have been seeing AI for quite a bit of time. So the first type of AI is predictive AI, where the idea is to make predictions or classification based on the patterns in the data. The most basic example is spam detection that we have in our email service providers. So if our service provider identifies that there are patterns in an email that we received, which is similar to the patterns of spam emails, then it would just mark it as spam and send it to the spam folder. Now, this is useful for us because if you're receiving lots of emails, this AI could help us organize such emails. Other examples could be, for example, YouTube recommendations. If you're watching a YouTube video on any theme that we like, YouTube usually provides us suggestions, which we then go ahead to watch. Same thing occurs, let's say, if you're listening to a music. Another example could be Google search results. If you're not really sure about uh, a particular website that we're looking for a particular information, then we can just use Google search. And Google search does a great job in identifying web URLs that we would be interested in. So there are a variety of applications of predictive AI, and we've already seen quite a bit of them, and we use quite a bit of them as well. Now, recently, and by recently, I'd probably say over the last 3 to 4 years, we have seen the use of generative AI increasing. So generative AI is different from predictive AI. What predictive AI would do is that it would analyze data and then it would take a decision. It would predict something. Generative AI would still analyze the data that's available to it, but it will learn patterns from it so that it can create new data. So it essentially produces new content based on learned patterns from the training data. And some examples of that are Gemini, Chat Assistant, or ChatGPT. We've also seen how, for example, we can use these chat assistants in order to create images or infographics. We've also seen that these could be used to create music generation. For example, in previous sessions, we've done that. So the idea is that we have two different types of AI, and the idea is to leverage whichever type is more useful to us in order to automate a lot of the stuff that we do. Now, before we get into automation, it is important to understand that AI is simply our smart assistant. So it's like a helper. It can draft stuff for us. It can summarize stuff for us. Let's say if we have a large document of 400 something pages, AI generally does a very good job at summarizing stuff from it. It would take a human being quite a bit of time in order to go ahead and digest uh, that document. But at the end of the day, AI is not really the decision maker. Even if we ask AI to predict something, to propose what should be done next after reading that particular document, we as human beings at the end of the day are the decision makers. So the responsibility at the end of the day lies with us. What this means is that we need to be mindful of all the limitations of the AI, all the biases that can occur, so that whenever we're using AI as our smart assistant, we're actually doing it in a mindful manner. Now, in order to make this work correctly, think of the following AI work loop. It's relatively simple and somewhat naive, but it should be a starting point. So let's say we have some input. Uh, we can use AI, for example, to summarize a document to us. So input in this case would be our instructions or prompt to the AI and the document that we provided. On the basis of that, AI could generate a summary for us. Now, one of the ways could be that we just accept the summary as it is, verbatim of the AI. But what is the recommended step is to review it. So it's essential and mandatory for us that we review any draft which is generated by AI just to make sure that it has not fed in some of the biases that AI would have. Once the review is done and we're okay with it, we can basically use it for almost any application that we want to go ahead with it. A caveat to this would be the institutional policy. So we need to be mindful of that. Now let's talk about automation with Gemini. And the structure that we'll follow here is first we'll try to talk about what we mean by automation. We need to have a baseline of what we would like to automate. And then we'll use a traditional way of automation. Let's say we'll craft a prompt, we'll run the prompt, we'll see that AI can help us along with it. And then we look at some of the limitations of that approach and how we can use Gemini gems in order to alleviate that, and how we can essentially create a mini AI for our task and then just share it with uh, our collaborators, our colleagues. For example, if someone's from the education workforce, they can probably share it with students as well. So just a few more slides so that we lay down the structure of what we'll do before we go and work with Gemini. So everyone here has used chat assistants. Gemini could be something that you use. It's a very good chat assistant. Some other chat assistants could be, for example, ChatGPT or from Perplexity or Claude from Anthropic. But in most cases, what we end up doing is that we just ask one-off questions. We ask something and, well, that's done. Even if we have to ask something related to the same topic, we just create a new chat instance, and then we have to write the entire prompt again in order to bring AI into the context of what we're really asking. But the real value of these chat assistants is with repeatable workflows, how we can just craft something once and then reuse it over and over again rather than restarting afresh every time. But before that, let's talk about automation. What do we really mean by automation? So essentially, what we want to do is any task that we do as human beings that involves repetitive thinking, writing, or structuring tasks, which we could do ourselves, but rather than doing this repetitive task ourselves, why not use our time for more productive activities? And this is where we can use AI assisted workflows. So, for example, if you have to write the same type of report every day or every week, uh, can we just create a prompt for AI, for a chat assistant, so that we can provide it the data and it just crafts a report in the way that we desire, in the format that we desire? Or, for example, if we have students, if you'd like to read lecture notes, would it make sense to use AI in order to summarize key aspects from those lecture notes? Or, for example, if it's education workforce who needs to create practice questions for students, they could probably do it themselves. But what they can also do is to just craft a prompt for AI so that it could generate these practice questions for students. So the idea is, with automation, we could do this stuff ourselves, but we would rather use the AI for it so that we can use our time more productively. Now, while we use automation, it is important to consider automation from an ethical perspective. That is what automation is and is not. So, while using automation, we're not really replacing professionals, even though there may be a desire or, let's say, a buzz that, hey, I mean, let's replace clinicians, let's replace teachers. Uh, but at the end of the day, we actually do need that those professionals, because AI has biases built in, and someone needs to review what AI generates. So, in many ways, AI is not really autonomous decision making. We guide it what it needs to think, how it needs to think, and how it needs to decide. And essentially, we're not saying that AI is going to be treating patients or grading students. AI is just our assistant. AI works in a human in the loop capacity, so that every draft that AI generates should ideally go through a human being, sort of says, all right, this could go for production. So AI is assistive, it is auditable, and essentially that's how we want to use it as well. Now, if we think about automation, I would probably think that there are four levels of automation. The first level is just cognitive automation. If I need to be thinking about something, if I need to be processing some textual information which is available to me, uh, can I then use the AI to process this? So I'm offloading some of my cognitive tasks, some of my thinking tasks off to the AI assistant. Another way to think about this, and probably the more useful way, is with content and document automation. Documentation is a lot of time that we spend, takes a lot of time that we spend in our professional lives. So can we just automate it? And uh, in most cases, you will find that it works really well when AI is asked to automate stuff that needs to be done with documentation. Now, we could go ahead and say that we could automate the entire workflow. So, for example, if we need to do multiple tasks where one task feeds into another task, we can just chain those tasks together so that everything is automated. So, we're not really going to be focusing on that today. Uh, Another one is system automation, where let's say we use AI, but then we're pulling data from, let's say, weather related information on the basis of whether if we want to book a sports venue, then it would pull in data for that sports venue and link everything together. So this would be system level automation. We won't be doing that today either. The focus would be how we could use Gemini gems in order to automate stuff as opposed to the traditional prompting way. And for that, for case studies, we are going to use cognitive automation as well as content and document automation. So first, let's talk about cognitive automation. Here, we'll be using Gemini for a structured thinking, which it is very good at. It has a context window of 1 million tokens about that. So the idea is that we can iteratively ask to just to think about what needs to be done. So there are a variety of ways to do so. This could be in the form of, let's say, role-based prompting. We ask it to be a teaching assistant, We ask it to be our infographic assistant. We ask it to be our data scientist, and then just reason over what we want to think over. Now, in this case, let's talk about two case studies, and we'll first use these case studies with the traditional prompt-based approach. So we have derived these prompts in previous sessions, so we'll just use those prompts. And then we'll take the idea behind those prompts and then just create these gems from them. The second one is a clinical reasoning and documentation assistant. So let's go ahead and work with these. So first, we're talking about an expert level reading assistant. So think of it this way. Uh, if you're a student and you have some class notes, what you'd like to do is, let's say, use AI as a teaching assistant so that it could help you understand what is in those lecture notes, and then perhaps create some questions as well. So in one of the previous sessions, we had created this prompt. It's a fairly elaborate prompt. And the idea here is that we'll paste this prompt, and then we'll paste some information, which could be lecture notes, and then use Gemini as our teaching assistant. So let's go ahead. I'll start Gemini, and in a new window, I'll just copy this particular prompt. So in text, let's say if you want to provide what the lecture notes are, we can copy a basic definition. Let's say we want AI to help us understand what photosynthesis is, and this is just the lecture notes. It could be other lecture notes that you may have. So let's paste it here. Let's run this. And what it would do is that it would summarize essentially what this topic is. And then what it would also do is probably ask questions. So for example, if a green plant is placed in an environment with sunlight and water, but lacks carbon dioxide, can it complete the process described in the text? So the idea is, one of the ways that we can use AI as a chat assistant is to craft a prompt like this. And every time we want to work with a new topic, we need to open, for example, I would store my prompts in a text file. I need to copy contents of the text file. I need to open new chat. I need to paste the prompt. Then I need to paste whatever my lecture notes are, and then we can make it work. So this is one of the ways to do so. But there are very obvious limitations with it. So let's say if you are working on your cell phone and you don't really have that prompt, then it makes it cumbersome to make it work. Another thing could be that you have lots of learning material to work with. Do you really want to go through this repetitive part where you paste the prompt? These are some major restrictions. So Google actually provides us a way in order to just automate this. And these are called as gems. I mean, it's sort of derived from Gemini to gems. And in order to work with gems, just click on this option, and it would provide you the option of using some of the built-in gems that are available, or you can create your own gem. So just a word of warning, you would see two sets of gems which are available. The first one are these gems which work on newer features like Google's Opal tool. And then there's a traditional way to create gems. The first approach is sort of a beta version, so they're still working on it. And I would recommend at this stage that you just work on the traditional way to create gems. So let's create our own gem. And through this approach, you'll see how we can use it and exploit it for the work that we do. So let's create a new gem. And here we can give it a name. So think of gems as our little assistants, which would open a new chat instance. But rather than this chat being very generic, this time around the chat would load up with your prompt already built in. So the idea is that you can just open a chat instance with the gem, and it would already know that what it's supposed to do. In this case, what it is supposed to do is to summarize lecture notes and then ask a couple of questions. So let's call it teaching assistant. And because I want to create multiple gems, so let's say this is gem 1. You can write a description of this. Let's say, in this case, I'll just call it gem 1. And then we can go ahead and write the instructions that we want to give it. So what I'll do is, uh, in this case, I'll just copy this instruction. Later on, you'll see that uh, how we can basically provide very naive instructions and then just ask Gemini in order to optimize the prompt. So because previously we were saying that text should be pasted, this time around I'll say that ask the user to paste lecture notes into the chat instance. So that's it. Now, if you want to use it, let's save it first. And it immediately says, do you want to test it? Let's go ahead and test it. So let's say start chat. So we had named it teaching assistant gem 1, and in description we just written gem 1. So this is how it appears. And whatever gems you create, they would be displayed under gems. So you can just access it over from here as well. So let's say we have the same text, which is lecture notes, and let's just paste it over here. So before we start, we can also ask gem what it is about. So let's say, what is your purpose? So what it would tell you is what it is supposed to do. So let's say if you have multiple gems, you can just sanity check by asking it what it does. So let's paste our text. And what it does is the same thing which the prompt was doing before. But rather than us having to copy paste the prompt over and over again, we can just do this. So what I'm saying is, rather than going for a new instance and then copying the prompt into the new instance and then running it and then supplying text, I would now just click on this gem that I created. I'll paste my text and it would just provide me whatever output that prompt was supposed to do. And this is brilliant in the sense that it is repeatable. I don't need to remember the prompt. I can just save it once and then it works out of the box. Now we can make it work for so many different cases. And let's look at the next case, which is about from a healthcare context. So the idea is that, let's say we are a healthcare professional and we just wanted to sanity check our train of thought. And this is something that healthcare professionals typically do. They would have an understanding of what needs to be done. But in addition to, let's say, just talking with a colleague, having a discussion with their colleague, they may just want to sanity check with, let's say, Gemini. Now, in previous sessions, we had created a prompt for this. And the idea is that this prompt provides clinical reasoning in an ethical approach. So idea is that it would make sure that it does not provide diagnostic labels. It does not suggest new management or treatment. So from an ethical perspective, we basically built in all these things which the AI is supposed to do. So let's copy this. And of course, the traditional approach would have been for us to copy it in chat, then paste the test case here. I'm not going to do that. I'll just create another gem. So we'll go into gems. And again, one can create gems using the Opal approach, which at the moment I would not recommend. And I'll just create the gem using the traditional approach. And I'll first paste the prompt here. And I'll say, ask the user to enter the case. And let's give it a name. So let's say healthcare reasoning, and I'll call it Gem 1. We have another exercise for this, so I'll call that Gem 2. And let's say the description is support in clinical reasoning. So this looks good. I'll save it. We can start chat from here, or if you don't want, you can just click on gems here. And just as a sanity check, let's say, what are you supposed to do? So it would then tell what its role is. And this is usually a very good way to work with it. So again, the idea is that we're now creating these mini AI assistant who already know what you want just by virtue of the gems that you've created. So let's copy paste a case example here. So again, this is something that we've already seen. And the idea is that we are providing a case data to this healthcare professional reasoning gem. And it would sort of sanity check the train of thought. So let's press enter. So it is providing the problem representation. It's providing red flag analysis. And it's also providing us which information is not available, because the idea is that we'd asked it to only work with the data that is provided in the case study. So if certain information would have been useful in order to provide a better clinical reasoning, it would raise that. So let's say if the healthcare professional has this information available, they can provide it, and iteratively the automated reasoning will just get better. And then it would provide some documentation as well. So the idea is that through this approach, we can basically automate stuff. And initially, we've only looked at automation in the sense from a cognitive capacity. But like I said, the most useful type of automation is based on content or documentation. So think of it this way. If students have lecture notes, what they would really like to do is to create a summary of from that. Or for example, if they have lecture notes, they create a summary and then they think of how examination or test questions could be asked from it so that they can prepare accordingly. People from the education workforce may use that lecture notes in order to generate exam questions like MCQs. So the idea is that we're taking in one sort of information from one modality and then changing it somehow so that it is more useful for us. So let's go ahead and see how we can work with it. So in this case, we'll be working with a few things. So the first could be to take class notes and convert it to study material. The second could be to take class notes and to create MCQs. And the third one could be to take in a clinical document or a policy document or a guideline document, and then create a gem so that we can use it for information assistant. Now, we had created prompts for this. And what I'll do is, rather than us using the prompts that we'd created before, let's just go ahead and create a gem afresh, because with gem, we actually have a tool in which Gemini would help us optimize a prompt. So let's go to gems. We'll create a new gem. And let's call it lecture notes summarizer. And the description could be to summarize key aspects of lecture notes. And now let's go ahead with instructions. I had a query last time around that. If you're not really good at prompt engineering, can we still make this work? So this is sort of an applied example for that. So remember, what we need to do first, we need to tell the AI what its role is. So if we really want to summarize lecture notes, we can say that AI's role is as a teacher's assistant. So let's say you are a teacher's assistant. So think of it as a personalized teacher's assistant for each student. And then we can say your task is to summarize lecture notes and identify key uh, aspects of the knowledge within those lectures. And think of what is its task would be based on what and how you want to use it. So let's say what I would also like to do is uh, to limit itself. So I'll say to limit yourself within the topics that are covered in the lecture notes. And we're doing this because AI would have lots of knowledge on that particular topic. So what we need to do is to sort of have scaffolding so that AI does not go beyond the topics that are in these lecture notes. And how should the information be provided? So provide information in the form of flashcards. If you don't want the information to be provided as flashcards, perhaps you can say that in the form of bullet points. If you want information to be summarized in the form of, let's say, sections and subsections, just go ahead with uh, with the approach that you like better. So let's say provide information in the form of bullet points, use sections and subsections where appropriate. Um, and I think the final thing could be, where is the input coming from? Ask the user to upload lecture notes that you can work with. So let's go over this very generic prompt, which we'll then optimize using the prompt optimizer. So how have we crafted this? So first, we have said that AI is a teacher's assistant, so we are providing it a role, and this is a very good context from a student perspective. Then we are providing it uh, in very simple words what its task is. So it is supposed to summarize lecture notes, and it's also supposed to identify key aspects of knowledge within those lectures. Uh, and then we are describing constraints that the AI should just constrain itself within the topics that are covered in the lecture notes so that it does not go beyond the information in the lecture notes. And finally, we are providing it instructions on how the output should be displayed. So the output, we said, should be displayed as bullet points, and it can use sections and subsections where it finds appropriately. Now, where should the data come from? Where should the lecture notes come from? We then ask it to prompt the user so that the user can upload those lecture notes. So this looks good. And let's go ahead and just rewrite the instructions. We can go ahead and we can create a gem with these instructions. But because we did not really craft all the cases of in terms of what should be the constraints, what should be the restrictions, what should be the output format, so I'll just use Gemini in order to optimize my instructions. So if you click on this option, it essentially says use Gemini to rewrite instructions. So I'll click that. And the idea is that on the basis of this, it has crafted a very detailed prompt. Now, the good thing here is that you can go ahead and make changes to this. If you do not like any aspect of this prompt, just modify it. But in this case, let's say I am actually happy with this. So I'll let it be, and I'll click on save. And now this prompt, so start chat. And now this prompt is actually available to me. So as a sanity check, let's say what are you supposed to do? So it'll tell you what it is. It's a lecture notes summarizer, and it'll tell you what it is supposed to do. So because we had specifically mentioned the restriction that it should remain faithful, essentially just to the data we provided, that's what it has built in. So now let's go ahead and upload a lecture notes, and then let's see how well it can help us summarize those lecture notes. So we'll upload files. Let's upload this lecture. So let's run it. So here is a summary that it actually generates. And the idea is that once we have created these prompts, we can basically reuse the same gem with another set of lectures. So let's say if I had another set of lectures, I don't need to copy the prompt again. Once I'm happy with the gem and the prompt within the gem, I can just create a new chat instance. And this new chat instance would already be loading in the prompt that we created earlier as part of the gem. Now let's go for another aspect. And I'd like to create another gem. And we already have a gem for summarizing lectures. Let's say we want to create a gem for creating practice questions. So let's call this gem practice questions gem. Uh, let's say practicing. I'll just say paste the same thing, press. And let's provide instructions. You are a teacher's assistant. You will be provided a set of lecture notes. And your task is to create MCQs with, let's say, 4 choices that can be used to practice the knowledge learned from the lecture. So we've specified its task. We can probably improve it. We can say that how many MCQs should be created with 10 MCQs. What should be the constraints? MCQs should only query the knowledge or topics discussed in the lecture notes. So we have our constraints. How should the output be? Let's say create an interface through which each MCQ is displayed one at a time. Student is provided options for the 4 choices. And you, let's say, grade the student. This way, student can practice MCQs in a live manner. So this time around, this prompt is not well thought of as well at all, but you'll see it'll still work. And we can also say, let's say to begin, ask the user to upload lecture notes. So what I'm really doing is I'm just sort of doing a brain dump of what I really want to do without considering a proper formal approach to create a prompt. And what I'll do is just rely on, for example, Gemini to optimize this. So let's click on this prompt optimizer. So it has generated a prompt. We can probably go through it. And if you want to create a user interface which is interactive, it's sort of makes sense to just create a canvas as the default tool. So let's do that. Let's save it. Let's start the chat. Let's ask what its purpose is. So it'll tell what its purpose is. Let us upload lecture notes. So let's run it. So what it does is that it'll create these questions, and as a student can just enter these options. So let's say in the first question, uh, let's say option C is correct. So let's type C, and it would provide you information whether it is correct, incorrect, and so on. Now, another thing what we could do, let's say this looks good, but we're not really happy with it, and we would rather have an interactive user interface. What we can do is we can go ahead and modify the prompt. So let's say we'll edit the gem. And if I want it to be a user interface, create the interactive user interface using React. So React is a language which can generate these interactive interfaces. So Gemini already knows how to do this. So I'll say with, let's say, Gemini Canvas. So I'm just providing a couple of additional instructions. And the idea is that we'll just update the gem. And you'll see that now it will be able to create the interface, which is much better, and we can use it. So let's say we'll upload the lecture notes once more. So we're already in Canvas. So what it's doing is that it's sort of creating a web app. It'll take just a bit longer than the simple text-based approach, which lies within the chat interface of Gemini, but this one would be much more useful and interactive. So this is the practice interface. So the idea is that let's go ahead and answer a question correctly and incorrectly. So in the first one, it is correct is option A. So it'll tell us it's correct. It'll provide reasoning. And let's go for an incorrect one. So it will be very useful for students just to identify what they're doing correctly and incorrectly. Now, the thing is, this doesn't really stop here. What you can then do is that you can go to the gem itself. And it's also possible to just share the gem. So we can actually go ahead and we can share gems with anyone that we like. So as, for example, as someone in the education workforce, what we can do is that we can create these gems and we can make them public. So that students can just practice with it. So for example, if you wanted to share with a set of students, you can, or another thing you could do is basically just make it a public link. So anyone who wants can just access this gem and then use it. Now, the last thing we want to do in terms of gem is, let's say if we have like a policy document, and then we want to make that policy document available in a summarized manner for healthcare professionals. So for that example, we can take any guideline from a World Health Organization. I think I've downloaded this guideline. So these are World Health Organization guidelines for malaria. And it's actually a really large document. It has around 480 pages. So let's say we want to make this information available to people from the healthcare sector. And we want to use Gemini for that, so that for them, for the people in the healthcare sector, it's very easy to do so. So we can also create a gem for that and then just share the gem link. So let's go to Gemini. Let's create one more gem. And let's say we call it malaria precaution let's say guidelines. Now you can provide, let's say, the entire name of the document based on, say, description is that it summarizes information from this document. And then let's go ahead and craft a prompt. Let's say your the role. So uh, you are an assistant that helps explain and summarize guidelines from the World Health Organization. What is its task? We sort of defined the task in the same line. So what we did here is that we provided it the role as well as the task. So let's say respond to user queries on the basis of a WHO document provided in the knowledge base. Um, ensure that you do not answer anything that is not in the knowledge base. So we're sort of trying to provide guardrails for it. Uh, we can also say that if the user asks something that is unrelated to your role, uh, refuse to respond to that. And another thing could be in the form of how the output should be, that be brief in your replies. Let the user prompt you for detailed information. So what we've done here is that we've sort of done a brain dump of what this gem should do, what this assistant should do. And after that, we'll just use Gemini in order to improve instructions. Something went wrong. Let's see what went wrong. Can we run it again? Okay. I'll just try to rerun this. Let's say. Right, so now it's done. Let's say WHO policy summarizer. And this time around, I'll just skip the description because we are sort of running out of time and we'd rather see it working. So let's say the default tool, do we want it to do anything? We don't really want it to generate an infographic, but if you want to, you could. Especially using infographics approach to help people see the guidelines in an illustrative manner, this could be useful. And you can do other stuff as well. So we've seen how we could generate music or do deep research or work with Canvas or even generate images. We could use that as well. But in this case, I won't. What we will do here is that we will provide the knowledge base to Gemini by default. So we won't ask the user to upload the policy. Rather, we'll just upload this document ourselves. So let's just wait for it to load in this document. So that's done. We can now save this gem. And then let's start. So as always, the best idea is to just ask it what it's supposed to do as a quick sanity check of how it would think and automate stuff. So let's say, what are you supposed to do? And because Gemini already has some guardrails built in, so it would already give a disclaimer that it won't really provide consultation, and this information is for medical advice only. So it would tell you what it is supposed to do, and what it would do is to assist us in guidelines. So let's say I ask a question, what are the do's and don'ts? So now it's basically going through that document, and it would provide you information. It would provide the user information about what needs to be done and does not need to be done. Another thing it could do is that it will also provide you which text it is referring to while answering these questions. So the idea is that in this way, we can create these instances of AI which could be provided to different users. Now, one last thing that uh, I'll just show you is we can also share this policy reasoner. So let's say if you're healthcare professionals, we can create this gem and then we can share with them. The only thing is that when we share with them, we don't just share this particular gem, but we'll also have to share the PDF that we shared. So the idea is that we need to be sharing both whatever document that we are providing in the knowledge base as well as the gem, and then it could be shared publicly and used by anyone uh, that we want to use it. Now, just to close this, the key takeaways from this automation using gem are that we can automate a lot of the repetitive work. One approach is to just create a prompt. Another approach is to just create a gem, and then we can just reuse then that gem over and over again without having to remember what the prompt was. We can also go ahead and modify the gem so that if we need to make any changes, we can go ahead and do that. But it's important to remember that what Gemini really is doing is to organizing our work and essentially just reusing the data we are providing it. We need to make sure that human beings remain in control of decisions which are based on the output of these gems. And another thing, what I would recommend is that you think in levels. The first would be to automate cognition, and the second one is to automate stuff that deals with documentation. And it would be very interesting to see what sort of application or use cases of these gems would be in your line of work. So that's it from my end. It was fairly long, but hopefully it was quite interesting as well.
Thank you, Dr. Zafi, for the resourceful session and sharing us the strategies to use Gemini effectively. Though we use AI assistants every day, we always learn something new from your sessions. So it means a lot. And meanwhile, I read the question. We have a question.
Mhm.
Other participants can write down questions. So the question is from Zobi Khan. Is there any guidelines for effective programming prompts?
Yes, we did have a couple of sessions on effectively creating prompts. We can probably do that sometime soon again, but that recording should be available. Also, if you're taking the module 3 is about prompting, you can go ahead with it. But hopefully what you've also seen is that if you're creating Gem, and if you just provide the general idea to Gemini, it would just create a prompt for you, a fairly elaborate prompt. You can go ahead and modify that. But for a more guideline, I would say just refer to module 3.
Thank you, Dr. Zafi. Hope that answers the question. And one question from my side. Dr. Zafi, can we, while we create the jam, can we use the URL instead of attachments if we just want to scrap the information from our website?
I don't think there is an option for URL yet. You can try that. So in the knowledge base, what it's basically asking is you can either upload a document, or if it's already there on your Google Drive, or on the Google platform, you can import that. In most cases though, these chat assistants are able to basically scrape through any public URLs. So that generally works. I haven't really tried it for within Jam environment though.
Thank you, Dr. Zafi. So we have another question from Kashif. Sir, which one we use for plant biotechnology research, prompt or jam?
Uh, so essentially, gems are like prompts. The only difference in Gem is that you don't need to write the same prompt over and over again. That's what Gem essentially does. But let's say you can start with a prompt and then just improve the prompt using Gem. So you can create a Gem whose job is to improve your prompt, right? So maybe that works for you.
We have another question, Dr. Zafi, from Julius. Uh, Thank you for the session. I have a question about what is the difference between Jam and Google Notebook.
So Gem is, think of Gem as a wrapper for your for your prompt that is used multiple times. Google Notebook is slightly different because, like you mentioned regarding the URL search, so that sort of stuff you could do within Google Notebook. Google Notebook is a very useful and a slightly different beast. We'll be covering that a bit later on. But in a very basic manner, Gem is like a wrapper over prompt that we need to use over and over again. And Google Notebook is another sort of version of AI that's available in Gemini that can do a lot of things, right? It could do podcasts, it could create infographics, and it is more suited to the sort of stuff that Raval asked, where we need to search lots of stuff through a URL or multiple URLs. And Google Notebook is best suited for that.
Thank you, Dr. Zafi. We have a comment from Radhakarn. Radhakarn, thank you. And we are also looking forward to see you in the next session. A question from Ibrahim Ali Sheikh. Can you use James to control how a robot behaves?
I mean, you'd have to. So a robot would have an electromechanical part as well, right? I think the aspect would be that how do you go from a Gemini interface to the robot interface? I mean, if you want to do it, you can probably use the Gemini API in order to do so, but you'd have to figure out how do you go from output of AI to the electromechanical aspect.
Thank you, sir. And another question. So Kashif, we do have a website and we do upload the lecture recording there, and we will share the link via email, hopefully. The question from Farzana, what about the difference between Gemini and ChatGPT?
So both are chat assistants, of course, from two different large service providers of AI. In most cases, it's just which interface you are happy with. The thing with Gemini is that recently Gemini is providing lots of new features, very interesting features. Some of these you would have seen today as well. So it just depends what you're comfortable with. With ChatGPT, I would say that there are some constraints and controls regarding your data being used for training or not. With Gemini, once you are recording history so that your previous chats are available in your history, then your data could be used to train newer models. But I think the bigger difference is just what interface you are happier with.
Thank you, Dr. Zafi. Hope that answers the questions. So as we move to the end of the session, I will request everyone to please turn on your camera so we can have a quick group photo.
I'll just answer Kashif. Kashif asks Google AI, Gemini, ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude as well, which you should use for your research. It just depends on what you want to do. For example, for coding, if you're doing programming, then Opus is really good from Anthropic. So it just depends on what you want to. Generally, if you're just looking at AI as a general assistant, any tool would suffice for your work.
Thank you, Dr. Zafi. I request everyone to please just turn on your camera just for a few seconds. It will not take much time and it will be marked as your attendance as well. I can see a lot of faces. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking time to join us today. And thank you so much, Dr. Zafi. And we will look forward to meet you in the next session. Have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you.
Bye. Have a wonderful rest of today, everyone.